Good morning, everybody. You're more than welcome to our Biodiversity Week event. Thank you all for coming to hear this important story from Christy. I have my list ready. I'm going to write down all his good ideas and see how we can build on what has been done in the Tree Council over 40 years that we can build upon. So I'm really looking forward now to Christy's talk. And thank you to all our supporters and helpers in our tree planting and nurturing endeavours. So I'll hand over now to Christy.
Welcome everyone, and thank you for joining us. The story of the Tree Council of Ireland is, in many ways, the story of how Ireland came to see trees, biodiversity and community action as deeply connected. And there are few people better placed to tell that story than Dr. Christy Boylan, founding member and first president of the Tree Council of Ireland, and someone who has helped shape the living fabric of our cities, from the great expanses of Phoenix Park to the smallest pocket parks. We are running this Biodiversity Week talk today in collaboration with Easy Trees, Cron. Project founder, teacher Orla Farrell has partnered with us in distributing 830,000 trees since Science Week in 2019, with the goal of planting 1 million trees with Ireland's million school children and their communities. Orla?
As someone working through Easy Treesy to bring tree planting into the hands of children and their communities, I often feel that we're building on foundations laid by people like Christy. Quietly, persistently, and with great vision, Christy, we are delighted to hear your story this morning.
Well, thank you very much, Brendan and Orla, for that introduction. I'm delighted to be presenting this story of the Tree Council in True Biodiversity, and this will be the first part of 3 presentations. So this first slide is an outline of what will follow in the next 30, 40 slides. So you can see the beginnings started with Trees for Ireland, and I'll go through that in more detail as we progress. Then we had other organisations like the Landscape Association of Ireland. On Taishke, Trees Committee played a big role here as well. But we had the first meetings, and we talk about those. We registered the company as a charitable organisation, and we established presidents, patrons, and we were assisted greatly by FOSS workers. Now I'm telling the story through a series of projects. And in 1985, Professor Clark, he planted a tree in Timon Urban Forest, and that was the first official National Tree Week run by the Tree Council, and by its patron, Professor Clark, was the celebrant, we'll say, in the case of the tree planting. We had a limited draw in 1985, and that raised some funding, and the first project we got underway was Grow a Tree for Ireland with Boyne Valley Honey, the manager of which was Malachy McCluskey, and he died in recent years. In 86, we had Trees for Survival, an exhibition that was run by Brian Arnold. And then in 87, we had 3-week launched in Glenstall Abbey in Moreau, County Limerick. 1987, we established the broadleaf policy, or rather a policy on broadleaf woodlands. And surprise, surprise, we got an episode on Glenroe, which was a weekly soap opera of a rural family in Ireland. And it was great. We starred in the show, and we'll show you some pictures of that. The Millennium Arboretum was established in 1988 because Dublin was celebrating a millennium from 988, or a certain period in its establishment. And then we had, with one of our sponsors, Pitney Bowes, a project of elms across Europe, because it was in the aftermath of the Dutch elm disease, where many elms had been killed with this disease. 1989, we had a National Tree Week launch in Enniscorthy with Mr. Michael Smith, who was the new Minister for Forestry. And in 89, we replanted, or planted rather, there were no trees in the school at St. Francis Xavier in Castleknock, where my girls went to school, and it was next door to me, so I worked with the teachers on that. And then in 89, we established the Friends of the Tree Council of Ireland, which was a money-raising exercise. So now here's some pictures of in 1984, there was an Arbor Day by the Trees for Ireland, and you can see they had Dr. Patrick Hillary. It looks like it was a very cold day. See him holding his jacket, his coat. This was a planting of a specimen of ash in the grounds of Orsa. In that picture, you have the man with the hat was David Luke. See his picture inset in the bottom. He was a very active member of Trees for Ireland, and some other people who worked in the Phoenix Park at the time. The man in the middle of the picture is H.M. Fitzpatrick, Hugh Morris Fitzpatrick, and he lived to be the grand old age of 92, and he was quite an authority on trees. So he wrote this book, The Story of Our Trees, which was published by Trees for Ireland. And these are some excerpts from publications done by the Trees for Ireland. Mr. Fitzpatrick was regarded as a doyen of foresters by Owen Neeson, who wrote a book on forestry. So this was one of the first series of illustrations done on trees. You can see the oak, and it was in Irish as well. It showed you the difference between the leaves and the acorns and so on. So these drawings were done by a lady called Rosaline Murphy, and she was a member of the Trees for Ireland for many years. It's a very good publication, and you can get it online. Now, Trees for Ireland lasted for some years until it was decided that it was no need for it to exist, because the Tree Council was doing much of its work, and of course there was also CRON, which was a newer form of what Trees for Ireland were doing in the past. And many of the people in Trees for Ireland were getting old, so in 2003 there was a tree planting ceremony in the Phoenix Park, where a tree was planted by Rory Brewer. You can see him approaching the tree here, and behind him is Dr. Jack Durand, and Maura de Brewer you can see sitting on the seat in the top picture as well. These were founding members, you could say, and they brought Trees for Ireland all through until then. And sadly, they're all dead at this stage, and some of the people who attended that little ceremony are dead too. But the tree is growing very well in the Phoenix Park. So it lived for 52 years and was celebrated with this tree planting in the Phoenix Park by Rory Brewer, Dr. Jack Durand, and other members. Then there was the newsletter of the Society of Irish Foresters. There was a little bit of history here where it talked about Trees for Ireland. Now, we won't be able to read all this because it wouldn't be fair, but you can stop the presentation in your own time when it's after the recording, and you can read through it. But you can see that Sean McBride was one of the people, he was a minister in the government, who started the whole forestry planting back in 47, but Trees for Ireland was established in 1950 there. And you can see it was supported by the GAA and various other groups. And some of the people in that were Kathleen DeLapp. I have underlined her name because she was one of the first people in the Tree Council of Ireland. And the other people down below, their names are underlined as well. So that's a little bit of history back in the middle of the 20th century. Then we move on, and the Landscape Association of Ireland was formed in 1977. I was involved in that with some colleagues in forestry, as you can see in the picture down here, you've John McCullen on the left and Dennis Shannon and some other people there. So we produced some 4 publications, and it was a great way for horticulturists and foresters to work together and helped in the formation of the Tree Council of Ireland. Joe Deasy is the man second from left in the picture, a brother of Dan Deasy, and he was also very much involved with this Landscape Association. But the forestry people had the Society of Foresters, and they admitted later on that their home was there. So we merged this association with the Institute of Landscape, with the Irish Landscape Institute of Landscape Horticulture of Ireland, and in 1992 it was merged and is now the Irish Landscape Institute. So in 1984, the Trees Committee of Antasca was organised, and they organised National Tree Week. In 84, September the 15th, the Tree Council of Ireland was launched at a seminar in Trinity College, and the Forest and Wildlife Service provided £500 initial funding for that to happen. And in 1985, there was an inaugural meeting of the Tree Council of Ireland in the zoo, and that was followed by a tree planting with Sean McBride. And on May the 24th, we had our first election of the executive, where I was elected president and remained president for 5 years. Peter Cuthbert was the vice president, Joseph McConville was secretary, and Richard Webb was the treasurer. And we used to use the offices at St. Martin's House, Waterloo, which at that time was the offices of Forest Forbada. Now, this is a list of the presidents over the years and some of the pictures. You can see the years that were there. And I think there's a picture of everybody here. And with the exception of Kevin Hutchinson in the middle at the bottom of the picture, everybody is still alive. Poor Kevin died not long after he was president. So you can see in the top picture Professor Clark with some of us, myself, John McCullen, Margaret Gormley and Fergal Malloy, Mary Keenan in the middle centre with 2 of her children, Aine Lowner down near the bottom in the purple coat and looking into it, an unusual picture looking into a hole for a tree. She was president twice. Now you see down in the bottom right, John McLaughlin, and you have Brendan, who's the current chief executive, and you've Joe over on the left-hand side, you've Joe McConville, and the current president, Cormac Downey. We had 4 patrons, beg your pardon. The first was Professor Clark, and then we had Sean McBride, and we had Dr. Michael Smurford, and we also had Mr. Ambrose Congreve, who owned the Mount Congreve estate down in outside Waterford. Now, Dr. Michael Smurford is the only one who's still alive. And he was helpful to us in the past, which we'll explain in a few moments. We were also helped with the FOSS Community Employment Scheme. And over that period, about 40 persons served the Tree Council in about 10 years. And this is a list of the names of those people who helped very much. You can see Art Caffrey in the bottom left. He was with us for many years. Michael Walsh and Ronan Madden are up on the left. Paddy Kelly became the first director, who was sponsored by the Cuilche. And Isabelle Lemarie was a French lady who was a secretary for many years. When we started the draw, the idea was that every ticket was £100, and we hoped to sell 2,000. With a prize fund of 90,000, and we hope to make a profit of 110,000. Now, Dr. Smurford bought about 25 of these, which was nice. And unfortunately, we couldn't sell 2,000 tickets. We sold 1,300 tickets, which meant we made a profit of about 30,000. But at that time, 30,000 would have bought a house. and we were interested in buying a house, but we chose instead to put it in the money as the interest of which we would use to fund the activities of the Tree Council. But we also funded Cron with the first group to request funding for their projects was Cron, and we provided some to them. And it was to assist in the formation and to the Irish Tree Society to help the purchase of Coolatin Oak woodlands. Now, it didn't go far in purchasing that, but some people won a car. Here is myself with a friend of mine, Christy Crosby, and Barry Kane up here. I sold many of these tickets through my time in Dublin Corporation, and so consequently we had a good few winners from them. So we had to postpone the March draw to April and so on, but eventually it was a great success and we were very pleased with it. Professor Clark planted a tree in Timon Park. You can see where the arrow is pointing where the first trees were planted, and all around you can see that in recent years this aerial picture shows how well that woodland has developed. The project with Boyne Valley Honey the idea was to encourage participation in community planting by inviting consumers of 12-ounce jars of honey to return 5 labels in return for which a tree was planted in a community. So we made up this community planting, which was 5 half-standard trees and 15 transplants. So that meant 20 of these vouchers. 5 by 20 was 100. If you got 100 vouchers back, that was 100 jars of honey. Boyne Valley Honey purchased these trees and sent them to you for planting with instructions which we prepared. This was very successful for us, and it gave us great exposure, we'll say, in the first few years. There was an option for individuals to return tree labels with a sum of money and have a tree for the garden. And all of the work was done by Boyne Valley Honey, acquiring the trees. We helped them, of course, and having the trees delivered. And this leaflet was prepared with questions and answers to explain to the people how the scheme would work and how to take care of the trees and the aims of the project. And this was the planting of a tree to launch the scheme by John Boland, who was Minister for the Environment, and this was in the Custom House. And if you look down to the bottom scene, you see the picture I got from Google in 2009 would show that tree where you can see in the middle of the picture. So it's an evergreen oak, and it grew very well. And Sean McBride is over here on the right-hand side. He was a help to us as well. So it was a very successful little scheme. There was a concern about trees not growing well in some parts of the country because of the lack of water and various things. And Brian Arnold launched this. He got the Minister for Foreign Affairs, Nora Owens, to launch this exhibition in the Gallery of Photography. And this publication went with it as well. And that was done during 3 weeks, and it was very successful. In Glenstall Abbey on 1987, we launched National Tree Week, and we went there because Brother Anthony, you see in this top picture, was a great advocate and still is of planting trees in the grounds of the Abbey. And Michael Hannon, you can see in the middle of the picture here, was very helpful. Himself and Peter Cuthbert went down the day before and prepared the project for our launch on the next day, Sunday. It was a new experience for myself and several others because we ate with the monks in their refectory, and it was one of these quiet lunches where we listened to the words of St. Benedict. But when we started eating, it was anything but quiet because all the utensils were aluminium or whatever, and they were all banging into each other onto the hard tables. So it was a great new experience, and it was a very successful scheme, and we're very proud of that too. Now, we also followed up with recommendations on the national policy for broadleaf woodlands, and this was presented to Michael Smith, who's down in the left side talking with me. We went to Larch Hill to Braddon, one of several tree planting ceremonies which we did with the Catholic Boy Scouts of Ireland. And he followed up taking the advice on board. It was the first such document prepared by the Tree Council and presented to Michael Smith in May 87. And some months later, he implemented one of the recommendations by introducing improved grants for broadleaf woodlands. And these measures were announced on December 11, 87 at a tree planting ceremony. Now, there's been several grant schemes undertaken in the years that followed, but that was the first for us. This was a major little event that happened. Glenroe in the era of one channel, you could say, before all these channels were streamed into our homes, we had RTE, and the most popular program was Glenroe. And you can see Joe Lynch was a very famous actor at the time, and he played Dinny in this show. So I remember writing to the producers and I asked them, would they like to include a tree planting ceremony as part of the show? And they came back and said yes, and they invited us to go along to that ceremony. So we went out to Glenroe, out, what you know the name of the place, Brendan, out in Wicklow, and to this church, and we had this tree planting ceremony. You can see the tree when Joe was standing against the stake. This is a clip from the production, and that's the tree in the middle of the picture, a lovely tree taken a few years ago. I go back after years and I try and find how these trees have grown. Now, also in that picture is Richard Webb with the cap on the left. He lives in England now, and he's in the bottom picture. The man on the left is Eamon. In the bottom picture is Eamon, who was a colleague of mine in UCD, and he was an advisor in Wicklow. And he has died since, unfortunately, as have Joe Lynch and Rory Brewer. So looking at this is nostalgic, but we're looking at old pictures, which inevitably some people are not alive today. The June 2013 is when I took that picture, and I've gone back since. A project with which I was very excited about was the Millennium Arboretum. And this was an idea because the millennium was all the talk before the real millennium came in 2000. And we were all looking for ideas. And the idea I came up with was plant an arboretum with 1,000 different trees and to have 1,000 sponsors. So we launched that, and we did get 1,000 trees with a lot of trouble, 1,000 different trees, but a lot of those were varieties of species because it's hard to get 1,000 different species. And we got some donations, but we chose a 16-acre site in St. Anne's Park, and the trees were planted and the trees are grown very well there today. Ben Briscoe was the Lord Mayor of Dublin at the time, and he was very excited about it. So we presented him with a book of all the 1,000 sponsors, and that is now buried under the spire in O'Connell Street. And it will be opened in 1988. Sorry, it'll be opened in 2088, and then we'll see who the names are. But of course, all those names are available from the Tree Council if anybody is interested in finding out. This was some pictures of the Arboretum before it was started, and you can see the layout. It crosses over the River Nanikin. It's divided up into continents, like you've the Asian trees in the top piece near All Saints Road in Raheny, and the Irish section is near the main avenue. We've also a European section, North American, Australasian, South America. So it's an area for education very much. If you look to the right, you'll see the layout of St. Anne's Park, and the red is the extent of the Arboretum within this 300-acre park. A friend of mine who lives in Raheny, near the place, takes a lot of pictures of the Arboretum, and he called his house Arboretum View. His name is Leo George Devitt. So he sends me pictures all the time, and this was a little collection of pictures he put together of events taking place there for various plantings, and even in winter scenes from his house, and how it has grown very well. So it's a great little project, and it's something to have that will stand us for hundreds of years. I take pictures of it from time to time. So you can see in 88, when we laid out the pathways, which we used stone first and then bark, we then planted the trees. You can see how it has grown and over the decades. And I actually need to go out now and take a picture these days when these cherries are in bloom. In the bottom picture, it was after that flowered. So it's a successful project. And it's also been used for other plantings. For example, this lime tree, Tilia platyphilus, was planted in 1994 to commemorate Jim Shannon, who was my boss at one stage, the former park superintendent. In the bottom picture, you can see the Irish yew, because that's in the Irish section, because we have Irish cultivars as well as Irish natives there. And you can see how that was 2014, so you can see how well those trees have grown. Now, Pitney Bowes were a sponsor for many years because John Barry, the chief executive, was very keen, and Pitney Bowes themselves had introduced Sapporo Autumn Gold, which was an elm tree from Japan, which was going to be resistant to Dutch elm disease. And this was one of the charts which were prepared to explain the problems of how this disease spread. But this beetle was the vector that carried it from tree to tree, and then it spread within the tree. So the project was elms across Europe. So they were on board as sponsor of the Tree Council promoting this project. So the roots of the Conservation Foundation go back to an elm planting ceremony in October 79 in Harlow, Essex. And at that stage, 15 million English elms had been killed by the disease. The new trees planted were Sapporo Autumn Gold, and they were developed at the University of Wisconsin to be resistant to the lethal disease. Saplings were planted by the US Ambassador Kingman Brewster at the European headquarters, and so on. So then Pitney Bowes undertook that they would spread these trees around Europe. So Ireland was part of that. So to promote that, they had David Bellamy, the well-known conservationist, come to Dublin and plant a tree in the grounds of the Irish Management Institute. And John Barry is on the left with myself and David Bellamy in the middle, and then people from the Irish Management Institute in the picture as well. And that was, and now my screen is hidden by some functional bars, so you can't see the trees very well when I took a picture in 1993, but they've grown quite well. So elms across Europe raised awareness of the plight of the English elm and helped to provide a tree which enabled elm biodiversity to be maintained. And the scheme also showed commercial organisations that there was opportunity for them to become involved in environmental issues. As a result, Pitney Bowes supported the launch of the Conservation Foundation in '82, but they came on board with us then when we were established. Now in 1989, we had the launch of National Tree Week at the Christian Brothers School in Enniscorthy, County Wexford. Now this was done in association with the local Lions Club, and it was a fantastic event, and we had great support from them. But in the top picture you see in June '91, which a few months after the trees were planted, there was nothing on this little half circle in front of the school. So we planted a number of trees, which probably too many, but there were various dignitaries were given an opportunity to plant trees, one of which was Minister for Forestry, Michael Smith. Now, as we started Michael Smith, he got on this carriage with a horse drawn by a horse, and I was up with the driver. And we got on this carriage outside the hotel in the middle of Enniscorthy, and we drove, the horse brought us And there was a parade behind us, and a lot of people stood on the street watching us go by. It was a wonderful event. And when we got to the school, there was full of people, and they cheered. And when they cheered, the horse bolted. So when he bolted, he fell. But the minister got out of his carriage and went over and caught a hold of the reins and calmed down the horse, and then proceeded to bring him around that little arch, and everybody got out and the planting took place. And while I was there, that's not me now in the picture, that's someone else. I don't know who that is. But while I was looking at this, I couldn't get out of the carriage because the horse had twisted it. RTE were up on the hill filming it. So it all went out on the 6 o'clock news. It was great publicity for us. Now, when you go back to, as I've done over the years, you can see how those trees have grown. So it's arguable that they're too big now and they need thinning, but that last picture on the bottom right was 2009. So I imagine it's quite big now. Now, some other activities around 89, out around, this is Michael Smith planting a tree in Deer Park, which is in the south side of Dublin, with various people, including myself. Michael Lynch in the middle was the head of the Parks Department in Dublin County Council. He's now retired. And Leslie Moore on the left is the current head of the Parks Department in Dublin City Council. Niamh Brannock is the politician with the minister there. Those trees have all grown very well. Now in 1989, there was our girls went to the local school, St. Francis Xavier, and as you can see in these pictures, there were no trees in it. So I felt we had to do something about it. So I worked with the teacher there, and we came up with a project. We learned at the time that the Department of Education will not provide money for tree planting, but they will for fences. So this is why you didn't have any trees in it. But this school built in the 1970s had something like 800 children. I think it is a lot more now. It's been extended. But the construction budget did not include any tree or shrub planting. So we had a project undertaken with Kevin Hussey and the cooperation of teachers, parents and children, and we raised something like €30,000 or pounds it was at the time, and we bought trees, and the parents helped plant them. So you can see some of the pictures before and after, on 89 before at the entrance, and Brian Lenihan, the father, we'll say, who was Tánaiste at the time, he planted the trees at the entrance that you can see here. And on 1992, you can see how they're growing. And it was a great little event, and it's very successful today. These are some pictures of the parents planting the trees, and they came out on Saturdays, and the children came as well. And then we had special events with the children. So it's a great success, and this is where it's located, near Tesco in Blanchardstown. Now, the Friends of the Tree Council were launched in 1989, and we were conscious of the need to establish a long-term system of financing the operations of the Tree Council, and we came up with this scheme. Dr. Michael Smurford launched the scheme on the 3rd of May at the Smurford Group headquarters, and a number of company directors were invited. And Joe Whittaker did the displays and provided a video display free of charge. The scheme was intended to raise sufficient funds for the support of a full-time director and to assist in the management of the council's affairs and to develop and promote projects. And the firm of Nokia were the first company to use the Friends scheme following initial contact made in July 89, and we came up with a special logo. So this was a picture of Michael Smurford launching that event. Now, thank you all for your attention to this first part of the story, and we will take a break at this point, and we will continue the story in part 2, and we hope you'd join us for that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Christy.